but I should. I know I should have.
If I don't take him, I have migraines. Baruch
I
Hashem,
know.
didn't.
I know. Gamani. All right. Thank God I'm taking a haircut today. L'chaim.
Same here. Thank God.
Okay. All right. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Rambam Hilchos Gezelav Aveda Perek Shiva Asar. This chapter is going to speak about a person who finds the lost article that is ownerless, the various means how one will acquire it and when will one not acquire it. This chapter has 13 halachas, beginning with halacha Aleph, says that Kol Mitzia Shamarnu Ba Shehi Shel Moitza. Whenever we're speaking about these lost articles that the finder will acquire. So now we have to go a little bit about Hilchas Kinyanim. How do you acquire something that's ownerless? You only acquire it if it either entered your hand, begashmi, or if it entered your property. We're going to learn a lot about King and Chatzar in this chapter. Avol, what will not work if a person sees this mitziyah and he sees it first. And more than that, even if he throws himself on it, and after that action, which is halachically not an action of acquisition, someone else acquires it, seeing something, falling on something, doesn't create a kinyan. Halacha base. If a person is riding on an animal, he finds this lost article. Again, and he knows it's going to belong to him. In other words, we're not speaking about someone who's running to do the mitzvah of Hashavas Haveda. We're speaking about someone who wants to acquire something that's onerous. And this guy doesn't want to get off the animal. It's hard for him to get off, to get on. And there's someone walking on the ground. And he tells his fellow, and he heard the words, acquire it on my behalf. So the rule is, that person who did not say anything to the contrary, kivin shik be aloy, when that person indeed follows through with the request, if the writer acquires it, doesn't have to go into the hand of the writer, because of the din of shlichus, right? But he was doing it on behalf of the writer. However, that's only if he uses the word zecheliba, acquire it on my behalf. But if he tells this person who's on the ground, give it to me, acquire it for me is one thing, give it to me is something else. And when this person picks it up, he says, I picked it up for myself. Then if he makes that statement prior to giving it to the writer, clear, he didn't pick it up for the writer. However, but if after he gives it to the writer, listen, I want you to know that that I acquired it for me first, then we say loy amar klum. Halacha gimel. If a person picks up a lost article for someone else, he wasn't even asked to do so, but he did so, then kana chaveder, the fellow will acquire it. As Chazal tell us, that zachin la'adam shaloi b'fanav. Shaloi b'fanav means not only not in his presence, he doesn't have to make that request. If something is only to your benefit, it's not also to your detriment, then automatically you acquire it. Now, another rule, this is important, that he bihu hamitzia shnaim, if two people pick up a lost article at the same time, then we say kanu shneim, they both acquire it. Now, just to add some words which are very important to understand the following halachas, the presumption is that if me and you, Kevan, see a lost article, and me and you see each other, and me and you know that we're both picking it up at the same time, that my intent from the outset wasn't only to pick it up for me. I noticed we're going to get it together anyways. I picked it up for me and for you. And you picked it up for you and for me. And that's why we both acquire it. That's going to be important. In other words, I want to just add a little intro, that if a person sees a lost article and he only picks up part of it, he doesn't acquire any of it. You have to pick all of it up. Now, when me and you saw something, we both picked it up. I did not pick up all of it. So why do I acquire even part of it? Because I picked it up for me and for you, and you picked it up for you and for me, and Zachan Adam, and I have the power to do something on your behalf. That's the Hemshech Hadvarim over here. And therefore, now comes the Chiddush. Now you heard this, it won't be such a big Chiddush. Allah Chadal. And if someone who halachically cannot make an act of acquisition, If they pick it up for me, they cannot be shluchim. Loikana pikeach, because she'ein boy da'as. And furthermore, now we put it all together. So let's say Kevan, you and someone who halachically cannot make an acquisition pick it up together. And like we said, when you pick it up with someone else, if you pick up part of a mitzvah, you acquire none of it. Part of a mitzvah. The reason why you acquire it is because everyone picked it up for the other. If any of the parties cannot affect a kinyan, you could, but the chedesh cannot, then no one acquires anything. Not you only get half. No one gets anything. However, what happens if they're both chedeshim, if they're both deaf mutes, halachically they don't das, then midrabanan they do both acquire it. Wow. Why is that? Because since people were familiar that a chedesh cannot make an acquisition, many times the chedesh would pick something up and another guy would chop it out of their hands. And that would lead to a lot of fighting. So they said, no, a chedesh picked it up, the chedesh acquires it. Now, in the first case of this halacha, when it's someone who's intelligent and a chedesh, it's very rare that a third party will grab it out of their hands because he sees a pikeya. So we didn't have to make this takana. And by the way, they don't acquire it. And if the third guy did it, the third guy will acquire it. By two chedeshim, like by one chedesh, halacha. Shnaim should all gamal if two people see a camel or a chamad or a donkey, which is shamutzi, which is ownerless. And guys, everything until now was ownerless. I just want to say like this, that for example, when I said that if you pick something up only in part, you don't acquire any of it. This is when you are picking up something that has no owner. When something has an owner and the owner is giving it to you or selling it to you, it's called das acheres maknoloi. It's easier for the recipient to make a kingdom because there's someone like giving it to you. When you're taking something from hefker, no one is giving it to you. You have to make a stronger kingdom. Okay. And they both rushed. And vihinigu, and they both led it. They directed it. Okay. Oy mishachu. Mishachu means that they drawed it. They drawed it after them. I just want to say drawing it, kevan, means, mishicha means that they caused one of the front legs and one of the hind legs to move. They didn't do it by leading it, but they caused it to be drawn after them, to make that movement. One did one did the other. Then the din is kanu shneyem. That's by the donkey. Say Chazal, even though both either leading it or drawing it is a kinyan, but if two people do it together, being that one is better than the other, the one that did the better one will acquire all of it. The one who drawed the camel caused the front, one of the legs of the front and of the back to move. Because that's the way people lead camels. They don't lead it. In other words, it's less leadable. Okay, halacha vav. The hemas mitzia. If you have an animal again that it's ownerless, and again in a scenario where there's no simon, which means that the finder will acquire it. The person who grabbed it didn't grab the animal, but he grabbed the reins. So even though the reins are connected to the animal, the reins are subservient. They're secondary. They're tougher. So you want to acquire it. By the way, you acquire the reins, but you don't acquire the animal. And that's not only if something is ownerless because someone lost something without a sibling. The chein b'nichsei haget, if someone converted, as we continuously learn, and they don't have children post-conversion. So they are the only people that halachically have no heirs, which means when they pass away, everything becomes ownerless. You don't acquire it by chopping the reins, but you did acquire the reins. Furthermore, so again, if the animal is ownerless and there are reins connected to it, and two people are going for it, and one person jumps on it to ride it, and the other person chops the reins, so perfect shidduch. The rider acquires the animal, and the reins that are on the cheeks of the animal. No, it's a portion of the reins that are attached to the cheeks. That's also included in the animal. The other one that chap the reins is all at the same time only acquired the part of the reins that are in his hand. And the rest of the reins, no one acquired. These are the big klalim, which is amazing. Notes once they don't both acquire, it's either one or the other, even though it's one reins, halachically we divide it. These are the big rules. So now we're moving on, halacha ches, to something that we kept on mentioning, which is that if something falls or goes into my courtyard, even if I don't know about it, under certain conditions, my courtyard will acquire it for me. Now we'll see the details of these halachas. A person's property, literally courtyard, will acquire a ownerless item for its owner, even without the awareness of the owner. Doesn't even know that something is there. Therefore, if the metzia falls in there, belongs to the owner of the courtyard. But now we're going to see the prerequisites. Number one, it has to be a courtyard that protects. The item in there cannot go make its way out. Also, it's not a property that's open for the public. A field is open to the public. Even various gardens were open to the public. Public had the right to walk through it. A courtyard is a place where people mamish would extend their private house usage in the courtyard. Abel besada v'gina, whether even a gina, like we mentioned, these things are open to the public. So it's not called a guarded place. So you need to have another precondition. If the owner is there, he's at its side, and he says, not just standing there, Zachas li sadi, may my field acquire for me, then yes, Zachaba. But if he's not standing there, he's not even aware, Kavan, that it's there. But more, even if he's standing there, but he didn't say that declaration, then the fact that it's in my sada or my gina doesn't have any halachic consequence. And kol hakoidim zacham. Now let's extend that. So now that we established that one's courtyard acquires on their behalf, midrabanan, 4 cubits, not everywhere. Some places are considered my courtyard. This is the ground zero of these halachas. The 4 cubits around a person, meaning, then Zachaba. I want to add a nuance. This is, as we'll see in the next halacha, midrabanan, but only when you're standing. Means when you're walking, it's not strong enough, even midrabanan, for us to say that the surrounding 4 amas around you are considered an extension of you. We don't say it. Yes, when you're standing. Now, halacha tes, where does this come from? Says the Rambam, chachamim tiknu davar zeh. The sages enacted this rule. For people who find a lost article, for them not to fight one with the other. And you have to think about it more, but it works. In other words, many people, the first time we learned the Gemara, we spoke about it. Well, why wouldn't they fight? It came into my daladamas first and came into your daladamas first. It's not true. I mean, first of all, if people want to fight, they can always fight, but it substantially diminishes a machlokes. Because what you normally do have is you have someone who's a slow person. 2 people are running to get it. One guy already began a lot closer. So the faster one and the slower one might end up chopping it at the same time. That's the first mission in Bava Metzia. I got it completely from me. You got, but everyone will agree. It's more common on you were there first. It was closer to you first. That yet. Another din. It's not everywhere. It's only either besimta in an alleyway or b'tzidei reshus harabim, or some, in the sidewalks, the sides of the reshus harabim, meaning it's not jam-packed with people. People are not crammed into it. Or better, even in a field that doesn't have an owner. If a person is either in a place where it's packed with people or in someone else's property, the Chachamim never enacted this rule. Now we have this phenomena, which is very rare, that even though chatzir acquires for the person, it's gender related, meaning male or female, chatzir works through another halachic tool. It's amazing. and there's going to be consequences for that. And the Rambam goes right into the consequence, and he's going to go backwards explaining why we will differentiate between a minor girl and a minor boy. Kitano, a female that's even when she's a minor, also has the power of chatzir. And subsequently, midrabanan, the 4 amas works like her chatzir. However, a male, minor, not adult, v'katan ein lo chatzir, the din of a chatzir acquires on his behalf does not work, and therefore, if it doesn't work biblically by his own real property, then this rabbinic 4 amas, when you're standing and it's bit simta, doesn't work either. And the Rambam explains beautiful. Now, why is it so that Rambam doesn't say? But first to know the facts. Before the why is the why. How do we know that my courtyard is my extension? Where does it learn from? So there are 2 lemudim, and one is by the woman, by the get, as we'll see. And the woman, and by the way, a woman who is a minor at times could get a get midoiraisa because a father can marry off his daughter. In such a case, the husband can give her a get. So let's go. How does chatzah work? So by a get, Parshas Kiseitze, the Torah says the words that he gives it in her hand, the nasan biyada, and the sages tell us that it doesn't need to mamish be in her hand. That included in biyada is her property. Okay, so it's an extension of her hand. Now, and now once we have that established by a get, we extend it to any article, anything, including a lost article. Once she, even a ketana, has this power that her chatzir acquires on her behalf, then midrabanan, even 4 cubits, that does not belong to her. Now let's go to the gender, to the male gender. Also, chatzir of a man also acquires, but it's learned from the din of shlichus. And as the Rambam learns in shluchim v'shutvim. Now hold on, shlichus is different because I can only appoint an adult to be my shliach. I cannot appoint a minor to be my shliach. So since a minor cannot be a shliach, the chatzir cannot be a shliach. And the hakot hoil ve'inois shliach, a chatzir cannot make a shliach. So if the minor cannot make a shliach, so the chatzir, he cannot appoint his chatzir to be a shliach, so to say. And an extension, and by a cotton, wow. Now, why did the Torah give 2 different tracks for how chatzera works? That's a good kash. Maybe that's a good insight. Al pi pnimi is the difference between a man and a woman. But it's good to remember this. It's a very rare thing that a kinyan is gender related. And it's ironic. They both work. No, the guy says it's not what kinyan works for a man and doesn't work for a woman. No, that's not a good question. You can say what kinyan works for an adult, for a minor, a woman, for that, yeah. But it's more, how does it work? Same kinyan, chatzir works. By a female, it works mitzad yada, and by male, mitzad shlichus. The consequence will be the minor ketana, the minor cut. Halacha Yuda, says the Rambam. You're seeing other people chasing after a metzia. We're speaking about an animal that's moving. That's what we're talking about. The animal that's moving is either a wounded deer, they're doves, they're young, chicklets, they don't yet know how to fly. They're moving, but they're not moving as much as they normally would. It's like this. If you're near a field, and let's add the nuance, and if you would have run after them to physically take hold of them, you are able, while they are still in your field, you would reach them. That's the key over here. And therefore, even though the Metzia is not sitting in your property, which is normally what's needed, Kevan, when we spoke about a chatzar, we need for the Metzia to be stationary. Even though it's not stationary, it's as if it's stationary. Now, hold on. Even if a mitzvah is stationary, the Rambam already told us that by a chotzer, it works. But by a sada is by default not nishtameres. So you need the other conditions, that you're standing on the side and you make the declaration. Indeed, if you say zachas li sadi, even though you didn't chase it, so then zachas li sadeyu, all of that is because if you want, you can take hold of it while it's still in your field. So even though it's not stationary, it's as if it's stationary. But even if it's wounded, doesn't matter, but it's still moving. You might be far away. The owner also might be an alta yid or a young person that never exercises. They can't reach it. So then it's like any deer that's running kedarko, or it's like a goizolas that are able to fly. And no matter what you say, it's irrelevant. No, it's chatzer shel adam koineslay. If the item is stationary, it's not stationary. So v'lo klum. And even though it's in your field, anyone else who chaps it, now again, we spoke out before that everything that we're learning here is really connected to the fact that you are requiring something from hefker. If someone else owns it and they're gifting it to you, they're selling it to you, that's called das acheres makna. That other person's intent of them wanting for you to acquire it makes it easier for you to affect the kingdom. And that will be a nafkamina. If someone is gifting you this deer that you cannot chase and grab, but it's in your sada, even though they're rolling, they're moving, they're not stationary. And by the way, according to most, you don't even have to state, may my field acquire it. You don't even have to say that. Because you made a kinyan, in other words, there was a consent to buy it. There was a seller and a buyer. There's a gifter and a recipient of the gift. And he wants you to acquire it. By the way, very good. When the item is wounded, where you could grab it, you don't have to make the statement. It's one notch down. But even here, if the tzvi is ratz kedarki, because also mefarchim, even here you didn't acquire. In other words, the nafkamina between das acheres makna and hefker is if the tzvi is wounded, and if you want, you can grab it. If it's from hefker, you have to say the words zachas li sadi, and if it's not hefker, if it's being gifted to you or sold to you, then a statement is not needed. Halacha Yud Beis, Mitzias Chedesh Shoyte V'Katan, an article was taken by them. They cannot biblically make a kinyan. So an outsider can say they never acquired it. Let me grab it from their hands. We spoke about it before by the Chedesh. Midrabanan, you can't. Midrabanan, they did acquire it. And if anyone else grabs it from them, then they're doing an act of gezela midrabanan. And that's a rule when it comes to all gezela midrabanan, which may not be done. If it was done, then you can't retrieve it even through dayanan. Or in the case where someone has something that belongs to his fellow, and they deny they owe it, and then they take an oath falsely, and then they do tshuva. The whole din that they have to now give back the keren, the chaimish, and the karban hasham gezelos doesn't apply if they only owe it midrabanan. The final halacha of this chapter, halacha Yud Gimel, now is again, it's all about the acquiring lost articles that belong to the finder. What happens if you have your son, your daughter? What happens when they find a lost article? Who does it belong to? So it says that I'm like this. This is the big rule. If they are being supported by you, the father, even if they are adults. Similarly, mitzias bitay hanara, even not only a katana, a nara, but she's not a baygeres. She finds a lost article, and by her, even if she's not being supported by her father, and even if she was already sold to someone else as an amma, umitzias avde v'shuvchasi aknanim, and the final umitzias ishtoi, in all of these cases, the chachamim, especially by the wife, right? That's called the Eva that we learned about. He's supporting her, and now her mitzias don't go to him. Then hadei elu shaloi. In contrast, avol mitzias benoi. But if your son finds a lost article, what son? A son that's not being supported by you, chiddush, even if he's a minor. A minor midoraisa cannot make a king, but midorabanan and pnei darkei shalom does make a king. Or umetzias avde v'shivchasa yo ivrim. They're your evadivri, but they don't belong to you. Or umetzias ishtoi. Even if it's only suffix migoreshes, no, she got a get that we don't know whether she's divorced or not. She needs to get another get. Called Elo Ametzios Einam Shaloi. Bevadai. They don't belong to you. Beautiful. And moving on now, the help of Hashem, we are learning Hilchos Gezelav Aveda Perek Shmoina Asar. We are learning the 18th chapter, which is the final chapter of this series, continuing to learn about lost articles, and this whole chapter will focus exclusively on finding documents. Now, understanding that a document does not have any inherent value. But when you give the document back to the malva or to the loiva, it will make all the difference in the world, right? If I give the document back to the lender, he will be able to collect from the loiva. If you give the document back to the loiva, then the loiva won't be able to be collected. He'll say, Adarab, I paid, that's why I have the document. Obviously, we're gonna, and by the way, not only in scenarios where there's a machlokas, the malva says you didn't pay, the loiva says I paid. We're going to learn that there'll be cases where even if both parties agree that the loan wasn't paid back yet, not always do you give it back to the malva. So let's go. This chapter has 14 halachas, beginning with halacha al. Says the Rambam hamoitzi shtar chayv. A person finds a promissory note. Now, what's unique about a promissory note, or a note that documents a loan versus a undocumented loan, is that a documented loan automatically places a lien on the property of the debtor. And when collection will be made, if he doesn't have cash or movables, number one, the lender gets to collect the debt from the property. And even if at that time, that's the key, he no longer owns property, because after he borrowed the money, and at that time he owned land or houses, he sold it to lekuchos, the lender, the creditor, gets to take it away from the lekuchos. That power of a lien is so strong that even if it's not mentioned in the document, automatically there is such a lien. Even if this type of lien is not mentioned there. So I find a document, and there's a malva and a loiva. Both parties say, no, it wasn't paid yet. No, it's the chayiv, the one who's losing from the document, the loiva, the borrower, the debtor is saying, no, I didn't pay it back. Give it back to the lender. You're not allowed to give it back to the lender, stam. Even though there's no doubt whether the document is forged or not, the document was already notarized. You, stam, cannot give it back. Why? What are we afraid? Everyone is being, I'll tell you why we're being afraid. Maybe the debt was already paid back. Problem is that there are certain lands that the loiva sold. The loiva wants those lands back. He regretted the sale. He's willing to pay the money back for it, but he regretted the sale. So now it will be to his advantage. Now he has to make this conspiracy, this trickery, this geneva with the lender. They both have to be on the same page. That's called a kenunya. They're making a deception. But the loiva says, I'm going to pay you for this. Partner with me. I'll pay you. Because now if the document goes back to the hands of the lender and the loiva says, I have no money, now the malva will collect the land from the lekuchos. Now, the borrower will have to pay money to the lekuchos. The borrower is fine with that. He just wants that land back. You understand? Because Shema, maybe it's paid. Elamah, they're making a deception. That's called the kenunya. The kenunya hemoisim. Why are they doing it? Because they lead to the boy min alakuchos, as we just explained. In other words, they're going to expropriate that property illegally, unlawfully. B'geneva, shaloikadin. And that's why he's owning up. And like we mentioned, and that's true, even if achrayis nechasim is not explicit in the document, doesn't matter. It happens by default. Shadayesh litra b'shtar, even shalei perish by achrayis. As the Chazal tell us, achrayis shalei nisparsha tol seifim. that's the different ways of wording it. The Rambam warns it that if a document doesn't write explicitly that you can collect with this note, even from the lekuchos, if that clause is not written, that was a mistake that the scribe made. Because automatically you could collect it. Or in other words, even though it's not written, you could collect it anyways. And that goes whether the document is a document of a loan, when we spoke about a promissory note, or even a document of a sale. I'll tell you why, because if I sell you my property many times, like today, when you buy a house in America, the buyer doesn't have all the money. So he gives a down payment and the rest he owes. So it's a document recording a debt. And any document recording a debt, it has a halach. It's documented. If the person defaults, if he owned any land while he undertook the debt, they become liened, and the creditor can collect it from the lekuchos. Lefikach, in Perish b'shtar zeh shu shelo yachrais. However, if they wrote in the document that explicitly that this will not place any liens from the lekuchos, in such a case, if both parties are moided that it's not paid, then you should give it back to the lender, to the creditor, because no kinunyu can happen. But that's only if both parties admit to it. But the imlav, but if there's a machlokes, the lender, the creditor says, yeah, you still owe me the money. The debtor says, no, I paid you back. You gave me I lost it. So right now you can't give it back, Shema Paroi. You don't give it back. Now we're going to go back to Samanim in a moment. We mentioned
you have
already
to do research.
Well, okay. So all what Kavan is pointing out is that maybe there are other ways, like nowadays, which is taka different. Like a Beis Din now can say, if one party says that I paid, right? So I know today many payments are made electronically, or even many things are recorded electronically. I know today there are other ways of proving it. I agree with that, Kate. I'm speaking about in those days. There's no record. Today you take a person's bank statement, you give it to any good accountant, he'll understand exactly what's going on. Halacha base. Now there's another interesting exception. If the document was mamash written today, then you give it back. But that's only because there is no question to the authenticity of the document. In other words, the document was notarized. But if it's not makuyim, that's something else. Any document that's not notarized, even if both parties are saying, yeah, I didn't pay back, lo yachsid, because Shema costs a little voice vadayin lo lavo. Now, why would the lawyer?
How many days do you wait? I mean,
on the same day, or just one day?
Only one day. Got it.
One day. And today, I know today. Now, when you buy a ticket, they give you many companies. They give you 24 hours to turn back. Well, once it's a day, next day. Now, halacha gimel. 1 second. So all of this is lo yachzed without a simon. Now we're going to go into some other. And we already mentioned, I think it was in Perek Yud Aleph, the best simon, the greatest simon, the most distinctive simon muvak, is speaking about the holes that they make in documents, which was common. Until today, they do that. Halacha gimel. They find a note, either in a chemes in a leather container or in a wooden container. We say that one is connected to the other. In other words, whoever gives a simon to the container won't only get back the container, they're going to get back the document. Another type of simon, number, minion, but meaning, if 3 documents were rolled together, or they were put one on top of the other, or they are bound, eged echad. I know whoever has the pictures can see pictures. It's all ways in which they were placed in a specific way. Only the owner would know how it was placed. Then yachzel l'mishan asam b'm simin. Halacha daled. Maybe we'll get a picture over here. If not, then we're good. Halacha daled. Hoya loiva echad amal v'shleisha. And you found 3 documents. Now, in this case, in the beginning of halacha daled, we're speaking about a scenario where it's all one borrower, and it's 3 lenders. So that is circumstantial evidence to say, come on, it fell together from 3 different people. No, it fell from the same person. It fell from the loiva, which means he paid back the debt. Why would the loiva have the document? Because after you pay back the debt, you get it back. But the but if it's not notarized, why is that? Because if it's not notarized, it's possible that all of these 3 Malvin gave their documents, there are 3, to a scribe, for a scribe to notarize it, and it fell from the hand of the court that's notarizing it. Oh, now in the reverse, all 3 documents have one lender. One guy borrowed money, lent money to three different people, and now these three documents are together. So again, what circumstantial evidence? Who lost it? The Malva lost it. Yachsel Malva. But here again, if, however, if they were all written by the same scribe, then maybe it fell from the scribe. And you're back to square one, means you don't know who to give it to. Now, of course, whoever gives the simon will get it. Yachsel only the Mishnah and simon. Because maybe, okay, good. Halacha, matzah studies keru'in. Ushtar choy v'neim. And I want you to know like this, that a document that's used is torn. Today a get is torn in a specific way. So if a person finds documents, more than one, and they have the tier which indicates clearly that that document was already resolved, and in between these stored documents, you find one document that's not torn. So the din is lo yachzor, period. And by the way, that's a hemshech of halacha dalad, even if all the documents come from the same malve. So the document, so give it back to the malve. No, here, no. If this one was not torn, since it's found amongst torn documents, we have to suspect maybe this document was also paid back. On the other hand, you can't give it to the loiva. We don't know that it was paid. You understand? Now, if together with the documents there is a promissory note, a receipt to the promissory note, even if there are no edim, then you have to give it back to the loiva. There's too much evidence that it was paid already. And you have an actual document that says it was paid. Now, I know that this document doesn't have edim, but you put all of it together, now you give it back to the loiva, even though the loiva doesn't have a siman. You find a get. Okay? Was if both parties are saying, no, it was given already. The woman says, I'm divorced. The husband says, I gave it to you. Then you give it to the woman. She doesn't have to give a siman. But no, now there's a machlekes between he and she. He says, I wrote it, but I didn't give it to you. You're not divorced yet. She says, you gave it to me already. So now you have to have a siman. So im nasno isha siman muvak. Yinas law. And by the way, the husband can also give the same siman muvak. You'll still give it to her. Because if they both know the same siman muvak, he will always know of it. Because prior to him giving her the get, he put a hole on top of that letter in the fourth line. But she would never know of it only after she got it. So if he and she gives the same siman, it means she got it. You give it to her. To imlav, then you don't give it to anyone. That's the thing. And she gives the siman. Here we go, clear. And the woman says, she gives the siman, then give it to her. Him knowing the siman doesn't take away the fact that she got it. Because she would never know the siman without, and it doesn't, in other words, it's not a raya that it was written by him to her. It makes sense that they both will know it, but he gave it to her, which is why she knows of it. But all of that is only if you give a siman muvak. What's the siman muvak by a star? There was a hole near a certain letter. Because now we know that she never would have known of it. And this is what we do today. Whenever a man gives a get to his ex-wife to be, if they're not together. So it's normally done through a Beis Din, and Beis Din has to send the actual document and was so careful with the get. Wow. So that's normally what would happen. They would send the get, and then they would notify the receiving Beis Din through another channel what they should look for in the get. And what they're looking for is, they normally make a couple of holes. And only the writer would know of that. With a pinholes, not in the letter, above the letter. Halacha zay. Another type of sim. Let's say the get is wrapped with a string, and he is giving a siman about the string. But she also is giving a siman about the string. Here again, we say you give it to her. They're not contradicting each other. He knew the siman, but she also knows it because she received it. And if she would not have received it, she wouldn't have known. But here again, what will be a siman muvak? So we mentioned that color is the siman she'einu muvak. So it has to be, for example, midas oirech achod, the length of the string. Now, when a string is being used in wrapping around a rolled document, if it's not unrolled, you would never guess the length. You would never guess the length. You have to know it. You opened it up. But if she says, it was red, or if it was black, colors are called. That's the classic example of the Gemara of a siman that's not distinctive. That's she'einu muvak. Ain't a siman muvak. Now, he was laying in this leather pouch. Another example, everyone puts documents in leather pouches. Not everyone, but it could be that a Ramoi will guess and get it right. Motza get shichrur. Bisman sharav moide. Same thing, similar eved, right? Who gets emancipated, becomes a full-fledged yid, becomes freed. So if the Rav is moide, then it yachzer la'eved. Mamish, like we have in the beginning in halacha vav by a get. If the Baal is moide, you give it to the wife. Question is, if he's not, he says, I didn't give it. I was thinking of freeing you. I was going to, I didn't free you yet. And now I don't want to. The Eved says, no, too late. You gave it to me. Ein harav moide lo yachzer lo lozeh lo lozeh. So now we're moving on. So we began with the shtar chayv. Then we spoke about a get. Then we spoke about a get shichrur. And now we're going on to a document of a gift. And there is a huge difference between a matnas body, which means a healthy person who gives a document. That's a document from which the gifter can never retract. Once the document was given, done. In contrast, and we'll learn that later. But when you have a shchiv merah, which is someone who's on one's deathbed, he's laying because it's bad for him. So really, Chazal said that his words, I would like after his death, for this to go to that person, for that to go to the other person, it's as if it's documented. So on one hand, his words are very powerful. And by the way, some people documented it for people to remember what he said. On the other hand, if this person gets better, then none of these gifts are a done deal. In other words, they only go into effect by death, through death, which also means that he could retract. So let's go. If it's a matnas body, amazing. Can't give it to anyone, unlike in the case of the get. Yes, like the case in the first scenario of this chapter by the shtar chayv. Why is that? Shema kosav litin v'loinos. Okay, the possibility is that the document is here. It means he wrote it because he was planning to give it, but he never gave the gift. And after he wrote this document, for whatever reason, he sold the field or he gave it to someone else as a gift. Now he regrets he gave it to another person. Let's go back to this kanunya. Maybe they're both moida. Here it's a simple kanunya. Kanunya means, listen, when I give a gift, I can only give it once. If I own something and I gave it to the Uven, and then tomorrow I give it to Shimon, it belongs to the Uven. The document that was found has a date prior to the second document. If the first document was given, then the first guy Taka owns it. So that's maybe what he's trying to do. He wants to deceive that guy. That's why he's moida, he gave it. So that his hoidah is not enough. Now, all of that is by a matnas body. However, but if it's a document that's recording the words of a shchiv merah, if both, again, the recipient clearly